Oh, yes. One small meal. I took over Bev's spot for the whole thing because we have communion today. And what a celebration it is to come back after so many months away and even here not being able to commune with communion. And in reading scripture and then thinking about the words that God wanted me to impart, one small meal. Now, I had considered Jesus's math, 5 and 2 equals 5,000 plus. Jesus's math was always wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But this one meal rates 4 discussions, 4 Bible passages. Matthew, the one we just read, Mark in chapter 6 near the end, Luke in chapter 9 starting around verse 10, and then John in chapter 6. Each version is slightly different. Well, each man attributed with writing the gospel was different and had a different point of view in telling the story. Now, we know that Jesus did nothing that he didn't include a lesson with. So what lesson could we take from this story? Well, first we need to remember that right before this, Jesus lost his cousin to beheading. What cousin? John the Baptist. John the Baptist is Jesus' cousin. Now, it's something that we don't really think about. We know that Mary went to see her cousin Elizabeth, who was pregnant, about the same time. But how often do we sit and think about the fact that John and Jesus are cousins? Wow. So Jesus has just been told that Herod has gotten away with murder. He was upset with John. His brother's wife was upset with John, and so they conspired. And now Jesus is in grief. And we have to remember that Jesus was human. Now, if you've spent any time in larger meetings, being on, you know that it's tiring. Even if it's just once a week. But Jesus did this constantly for 3 years. So he took a sabbatical, a quick, quiet time for prayer, which he did often for renewal purposes. And he went away to try to have some quiet time. Well, that didn't quite work the way he wanted it to. When he got to where he was going, there they were, all those people. So, of course, Jesus saw them, and what did he do? Stomped his feet, ranted and raved, yelled at them, scared them away. Go away, you bother me. Get out of here. Nope. He had compassion. He had compassion for those he saw. And he healed their sick. Is compassion for others the lesson of this? Oh, I'm sure it's in there somewhere. But the story didn't stop there, so there must be more. So it's getting late. The disciples are hungry. So of course, if the disciples are hungry, everybody else is hungry. And I'm sure one of the last things people thought about was packing a lunch, thinking that they were going to be there all day. Well, they were in a remote place. They didn't have food for everybody. And they say, can we send them away? You know, they've got to eat. We don't have the money for this. A couple of the scripture passages say that it would have taken about 8 months' worth of pay to buy enough of the ingredients to make bread for 5,000 plus people. I don't know about you, but that's a heck of a lot of money. And I'm pretty sure the disciples weren't carrying around that equivalent in their purses. That just wasn't going to happen. Jesus said, no, you feed them. And in typical disciple fashion, they said, we don't have any food. We have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And that's because this boy here has them. 5 loaves and 2 fish. Now, loaves, we think of loaf of bread. It was very probable that it was like a flatbread, a pita style. And it was made of barley. And only one of the scripture passages named the grain. Barley was considered a poor person's meal grain. But it was a filling grain. So these barley bread loaves and these 2 little fishes that this boy had, and he was probably working the crowd, selling these things to make a little extra money for his parents or himself to live off of. Well, maybe that's God will provide. If you just have faith, God will provide. Is that the answer? Is that the lesson? I'm sure that helped, making more points for people. Now there are 2 things that the scripture says in each different passage. The first is that Jesus took this small meal and he looked to heaven and he blessed it and he broke it and he handed it to the disciples to pass out among the people. And they did this. Everybody is sitting in the grass. Some passages say 50 to 100 people at a time. Some just say sit them in the grass and feed them. But can you imagine at least 5,000 people sitting in a field, and here are 5 loaves of bread and 2 little fish being passed around so that these people can eat? I'm a little skeptical. I'd be going, is there going to be enough? Because I'm probably the one back in the far corner. I mean, I know I can lose a few pounds, but am I at least going to get a nibble of bread? Well, with God, all things are possible. Maybe that's the lesson. But I believe that Jesus was using this situation to reinforce God's love, his grace, and his compassion for all of his creation, for all people. And he's trying to get that through to the disciples. but he's also saying to the crowds that he is truly the Messiah. Later scriptures make a point of talking about that a little more in depth. But I personally think that Jesus wanted to let the people know that no matter what is going on in your life, there is always room for compassion. Always room for compassion. Every one of us can show compassion to everyone else. Pandemic, racial unrest, perfect world, no matter what the situation we're in, we can show compassion, and that can come in the form of one small meal. I said there were two things. The second thing, each scripture says is there was leftovers. There were leftovers. 12 baskets worth, whether that was fish included or just bread. Scripture is a little hazy, and that's not the point. The point is there were leftovers. Oh, the things our God can do. It is wonderful and amazing and never-ending. And the baskets were big enough to hold a grown man. And this we know because of scholars who have done all the research and taken that time, and they refer to when Paul, John, was it Paul or Peter, was let down out of the town of Damascus, saved his life. And they were coming to kill. It was Paul. Yeah, it was Paul. Wow, sorry. He was let down over the walls in a basket. And they say that what was left from that meal filled 12 baskets that size. That's a lot of food. And that's what our God can do and what he does do. And I thank him every day for that.